Black Adam.
Black Adam was a good film. Black Adam was a fun film. Black Adam was an epic film. And in all honesty, those three elements were all that I needed and expected from this film. Like The Batman, another good DC movie released earlier this year, Black Adam doesn't exactly boast a very thought-provoking story, but it still manages to surpass it to take the title of the best DC film of the year due to its sheer ability to entertain and never drag on. There is never a moment of boredom to be had with Black Adam, and this is not exclusively due to the stunning action spectacles and witty humor that it undoubtedly possesses. Some have accused it of being a dumb film, which couldn't be further from the truth. A good example of a dumb film that relied solely on its comedy and visuals at the expense of telling a good story would be Thor: Garbage and Trash. Thor: Love and Thunder. Even the most diehard of Marvel fans didn't even bother trying to defend it because it was simply a soulless corporate production. Chris Hemsworth himself even admit that the script was written as though a third grader was behind it. How exactly is that statement supposed to promote a film? To make matters worse, just look at Taika Waititi laughing at how fake the CGI looks. The people behind this film did not care about it in the slightest, which is the polar opposite of the way the production of Black Adam was handled. I'll admit it, I was initially skeptical of Black Adam. And before I delve into why that was the case and what changed my mind, here's the timestamp for the actual movie review that you can skip to if you possess the attention span of the average TikTok user. I'd originally assumed that it was yet another film being dished out by Walter Hamada to distance the DCEU from the Justice League even further because of their link to Zack Snyder, and in his twisted mind, anything having to do with Snyder must be eliminated. What truly reinvigorated my hope for this film were two events in particular. Firstly, the swabbing of the old WB regime by everybody's favorite janitor, Peter Zaslav, which fundamentally eliminated the old Warner Brothers regime that cut 30 plot-crucial minutes from Batman vs. Superman and gave us Mustachio Superman after bringing in Joss Whedon just to rip off the MCU. It honestly baffles me that the old WB regime destroyed such a profitable franchise just because they went full-on panic mode after some critics left some bad reviews for BVS. What's even worse is that the course correction would have eventually happened on its own with the sequel, Zack Snyder's Justice League, as it was a huge hit with audiences and critics alike, given that it was a culmination of the events of the previous films finally giving us the Batman and Superman that we all know and love instead of the brutal Batman and lost Superman that were featured in most of BVS. It's a character deconstruction. That's how these things work. The characters have to initially be deconstructed before they're put back together again. Anyway, what that meant was that I could watch Black Adam with a pure conscience, since my money wasn't going to be used to fuel the production of trash. And the thing is, I was initially on the bandwagon hating on The Rock for no reason other than the fact that he seemed to be in pretty much everything recently. To add on to that, he wasn't going to be using an accent when it really is a big part of Black Adam's eccentric character in the DCEU films. The lack of Spock ears didn't bother me in the slightest, not only because of how inconsequential they are, but also due to their sheer goofiness. But regardless, his performances in films like Jumanji, Jungle Cruise, and Journey didn't exactly exhibit much range, and I was concerned that that would be the case with Black Adam. What got my hopes up was honestly The Rock's pure excitement for the film. Black Adam was clearly a passion project of his, and it was my first time seeing an actor, let alone a movie star of his caliber, single-handedly promote a film as much as he did. His enthusiasm for the film was truly contagious, and to top it all off, he took down a Black Adam movie trailer for a literal $200 million blockbuster because DC fans were outraged that a clip from Justice League was used. That's the kind of listening to fans that any fanbase would appreciate, let alone one that has been long neglected by the previous regime. Speaking of neglect, did I mention that Dwayne "The Rock" Johnson single-handedly fought tooth and nail for the return of Henry Cavill's Superman? Director Zack Snyder had set up his trilogy around Superman, and the iconic character that was supposed to be the face of the DCEU was instead relegated to headless cameos and has been in 0 films since 2017. That was literally 5 years ago, which is honestly insane and shows you just how incompetent the old Warner Brothers regime was. Anyway, it's safe to say that with the return of both Batfleck and Henry Cavill's Superman, the future of the DCEU is looking brighter than ever. And I'm not saying that just because of the Snyderverse cast returning. No, because this film was actually pretty extraordinary. Black Adam is introduced in the most badass of ways space possible with a literal thunderous bang. Black Adam absolutely annihilates the Intergang occupiers to mark his re-emergence in style, setting the tone for how the action will be for the rest of the film. Black Adam really doesn't pull its punches in terms of its brutality, to the degree that you feel like you're watching a Mortal Kombat fatality unfold at times. Black Adam is truly a spectacle, and features some of the best action that I've ever seen in comic book movies. The consistency and style with the Justice League trilogy and Wonder Woman shows that while the DCEU might be moving away from Snyder, they're not moving away from the Snyderisms that made his films as visually iconic as they are. The flight fight scenes as well were truly a spectacle to behold, very reminiscent of Man of Steel. It wasn't quite the same though, as most of the time Black Adam is simply gliding with absolute power and presence. In fact, the cinematography of this film overall was rather brilliant, particularly whenever there was a flashback to ancient Kahndaq. I'm not even exaggerating when I say that it possessed some of the most beautiful moments in comic book film that I've ever seen. The sets, the costumes, the camera work, and color grading all made me wish that we had a 2-hour film made in that style, set in ancient Kahndaq. Speaking of Snyder, it was all very 300-esque as well. Some might complain about the excessive use of slow motion, while in reality slow motion is the best thing you can do with this kind of action. Since things are slowed down, you can focus on the form and fight choreography behind every scene, as it really adds another dimension to the action. Yet another brilliant dimension that comprised Black Adam would have to have been its musical dimension. Lorne Balfe of Penguins of Madagascar and Mission Impossible fame gave this film one of the best original soundtracks I've ever heard since Zack Snyder's Justice League. There are two main melodies, one for the Justice Society, which legitimately gave me chills down my spine when I first heard it, and the other for Black Adam, which is so intense, and the thing is, they both thematically convey the respective characters. Black Adam's theme is full of the rage, power, and grandiosity that make Black Adam an anti-hero. On the flip side, the Justice Society of America is characterized by a truly inspirational melody, which ties into the theme of justice by using a few notes from Tom Holkenberg's aforementioned Justice League theme. Black Adam as a film also boasts a lot of the humor that comic books are known for. It isn't the cringeworthy, "that just happened," or "they're standing right behind me, aren't they?" humor that the MCU is infamous for, but it's certainly a lot more quippy than the Justice League trilogy. The human ensemble of this film that included Amon along with his mother and uncle did their job in acting as the representatives of the audience throughout the insane events that were taking place. The uncle, played by Muhammad Amir, was pretty hit or miss, and I feel like his role would have been 100 times more hilarious if he was played by DJ Khaled instead. And I'm not even kidding, DJ Khaled would have consumed that role. No fat shaming intended, but moving on. Amon was pretty decent for a child actor too, while some of his line deliveries left a lot to be desired, particularly his final quote-unquote inspirational speech. Overall, I enjoyed his Terminator, John Connor-esque dynamic with Black Adam, and he was nowhere near as irritating or stuck up as Freddy was in the Shazam movie. On to the Justice Society. To start off, Adam Smasher, who serves as the film's comedic relief, is rather charming, and his back and forths with Hawkman were actually pretty good. Hawkman himself, played by Aldous Hodge, was one of the standout highlights of the film due to the sheer intensity that he brought to the role. His devotedness to the no-kill idea for superheroes might have been quite extreme, but his dedication to it made him respectable. He's also the perfect example of how to effectively race swap a character in the right way, as he was just a dedicated leader of the JSA. He was a realistic and empathetic human being rather than just being a tokenized black guy who cracked jokes about race like films tend to do with tokenized characters. It was the same situation with Cyclone, who actually felt like an actual young woman too, rather than just being the caricature of a feminist, as comic book movies are becoming increasingly inclined of doing in recent years. And speaking of race swapping, as an Arab myself, I loved Black Adam in the role of Black Adam. I mean Dwayne Johnson in the role of Black Adam. He was just that good in the role. The race swap wasn't jarring at all either, as Johnson already has the same skin tone as many Egyptians, and honestly his head shape was also quite fitting for the ancient Egypt setting too. Dr. Fate was perfectly cast as the former Bond, Pierce Brosnan, who unfortunately didn't say Black Adam in a mildly disinterested voice like he did in all the trailers. Instead he said Teth Adam, which was ridiculous. Disappointing. I was honestly considering getting a refund, but his performance overall compensated just a little bit. This was especially jarring since they kept in everything else from the trailers, including the long dramatic pauses, which was kind of funny, honestly. His dry wit immediately established him as a fan favorite, making his eventual fate, no pun intended, all the more tragic. In regards to Sabek, the demonic villain, I don't really have much to say about him because he was pretty lackluster and predictable, but the final fight involving him still went hard, especially in IMAX. I now know why they went with blue lightning for Black Adam instead of his traditional yellow lightning too. It contrasts a lot better with the yellowish terrain of Kahndaq, along with Sabek's own red lightning. The same effect wouldn't have been achieved with yellow lightning. The JSA itself was superbly established as a squad force, but that still wasn't enough for the bozos who wanted a Hawkman trilogy, 4 HBO Max spin-off seasons of Atom Smasher and Cyclone, along with a 4-hour Dr. Fate epic before they came together to form the JSA. See, that's what I hate so much about the MCU. It's created this culture in cinema that insists upon solo outings for each and every character before a team-up one. That is unbelievably unnecessary. A good film should be able to establish each character in a single film, as Black Adam did, and that's almost always been the case in cinema before the MCU started giving unnecessary solo films to D-list characters, like Ant-Man. Since they know that the consumers are gonna fork out millions of dollars for each one, no matter how low in quality it is. Believe me, if the Lord of the Rings trilogy came out today, you would see people screeching about how, "Oh, I'm so confused, what's going on? There are too many undeveloped characters." Give me a break. What surprised me the most about Black Adam, though, was the fact that it was my Black Panther. As the meme goes, this film takes place in Kahndaq, a make-believe autonomous region in Egypt which has been under intergang occupation for the past few decades. Intergang is, as its name suggests, an international gang that has been oppressing the Kahndaqi people and exhausting its resources while receiving minimal attention from the international community. Sound familiar? Maybe so familiar that it's hard to pinpoint exactly what country and what region of the world this might apply to? Well, the relevant political commentary of Black Adam did a great job of capturing the imperialist attitude of the USA in the form of the JSA, along with the spirit of resistance of downtrodden people around the world in the Kahndakians and Black Adam. As a Middle Easterner, I was shocked and absolutely delighted to see how well conveyed the struggles and perspectives of much of our brethren was. The Justice Society cared not for the suffering of the Kahndakians until they finally gained a powerful leader, Black Adam, who could threaten them in the current global order. Only then did they decide to intervene in a downtrodden region of the world that they had long neglected. Protecting global stability and maintaining peace were the empty slogans thrown around by Hawkman to justify the JSA's intervention, while in reality Kahndaq finally had a leader who could lift them into prosperity and restore them to their former glory. The differences in perception regarding the nature of justice was also highlighted brilliantly. The Kahndakians explicitly jubilating at the annihilation of the invading intergang forces, juxtaposed by Hawkman's insistence on due process without knowing an iota of the suffering that the Kahndakians experienced at the hands of intergang, was truly notable. It perfectly encapsulated the mindset of some Western outsiders that try to give their opinion on matters of oppression and/or the morality of resistance from the comfort of their own first world homes. The message of Black Adam was fundamentally opposite to that of Black Panther. NGOs and diplomacy won't lead to actual change, and sometimes it's violence that ought to be used to finally put an end to decades-long violence and oppression. The line, "Not your son, not your country, not your decision to make," was hands down my favorite and the most politically relevant line of the film. People outside the West have their own ways and outlooks on life, inspired by thousands of years of practices and deductions. For the West to come in, call our ways barbaric, and put their own approved leaders in place is the very antithesis of freedom and self-determination. Hats off to Dwayne Johnson and crew for being bold and morally upright enough to feature this kind of resounding message in Black Adam. Also, did I mention that Superman was in this? While the use of the Williams theme was kinda jarring, it's still a beautiful sight to see Henry Cavill rocking the Man of Steel suit once again. Ultimately, despite its powerful character moments and bodacious action, Black Adam doesn't exactly boast the most thought-provoking of stories, which isn't a bad thing, but limits it from exceeding a solid score of 4 out of 5 stars after 2 watches. That being said, it's definitely my favorite superhero film of the year. My faith in DC has indeed been restored, and I'm already hyped to see Black Adam v Superman: Dawn of Dwayne.